So we're going to discuss the games from last weekend. Obviously, the two big ones from my personal point of view. Anyway, Kerry obviously Mayo, Galway Tyrone, and then we had obviously Clare Donegal and Sligo and Kildare. So there was a few good ones. Stevie, how's the form, man? How are you getting on?
Yeah, not too bad, Enda. First and foremost, congratulations on winning the.
We're back to this again, all right? We're back here again.
I did say at the start of the year they look good. No, look, and be honest with you, like I was looking back in the game reflection. Actually, I've done a piece this week on the game actually, and I have to say, me and you have had this discussion about Mayo, on the show previous years. I definitely think that they've evolved a little bit under McStay, right? There's no doubt about it. I think McStay has evolved as a manager as well. McStay's last foray into management obviously was with Roscommon, and there was probably a level of naivety, about some of their performances defensively. I know from writing in the article, like they shipped some big scores. I think there was like a 228 shipped against Dublin in one of the games, and I think what he realised as he's come back into management, and what he's realised is that forwards win games and defence wins championships. And I think Mayo 100% have become so much more destructive defensively. That they're a real different animal defensively. They're getting a lot of bodies behind the ball very quickly. You're a man who's a lot more versed in speaking about James Horn than I am. But under James, I suppose there was an element of high press. There was an element of press the ball at its source, press it high, press it hard, and I suppose when you come up against a team who were as systematic and methodically coached as Dublin, and it was only going to end one way, unfortunately, for Mayo in those games. And game management and a defensive template out of possession was probably the two things that maybe let that Mayo team down a little bit. They were a wonderful team. They were a phenomenal fucking side to watch. Great entertainment for the neutral, I suppose, at times. But I do think this particular group looks to be a little bit more stubbornness defensively when they're out of possession of the ball. Like, they were getting bodies behind the ball. They were scrambling hard. Their game management against Kerry was much better. And Kerry, on the flip side, were going after Mayo hard. And probably, one of the things that I identified this week in my article as well is they're missing that midfield general. Conor Glass's role for Derry is invaluable. People have this perception of Glass and thriving forward and kicking scores, but actually defensively, Glass is just so smart. He's so astute. He picks up little pockets of space. He cuts out so many attacks. He breaks down so many different attacks. He's a vital cog in their engine, and I suppose if you go back to the Dublin 6 in a row team, there was nobody as unplayable as Brian Fenton in those teams. And from a midfield perspective, David Moran's a massive loss for Kerry. A massive loss. I think they have an issue at 6 as well. I'm not sure if they're really set on a centre half back, but they're definitely missing that midfield general. But for me, Mayo at the weekend looked very, very well organised.
I'll pick that point there, Sammy, with 6. Tadhg Molly obviously got whipped off probably in the early 60 minutes. Now, Jack has stuck with them since his tenure started last year. Tadhg Molly has been a mainstay at 6. So that's an interesting kind of scenario there. Yeah. Why do you think why are you saying that, basically?
Well, I think they're shipping a lot of scores. They're shipping a hell of a lot more scores than they were in previous years.
Yeah.
Particularly last year when Paddy Tally came in, and introduced, what Kerry did last year, and it was Kerry prided themselves on a really, 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 tight defensive unit, real, defensive intensity, pride themselves on clean sheets. They lost 4 National League games this year. Now, we had this conversation on the show. They were absolutely hammered by Mayo. They were well beaten by Tyrone. They were beaten by a Donegal team who never won another game. They were beaten by Monaghan on the last day. Or sorry, Mayo were beaten by Monaghan. Sorry, on the last day. But Kerry, the Monaghan game actually was the one game where Kerry showed some sort of green shoots of previous form. Actually, apologies, but the 4 games that Kerry lost in the National League, and it really, really, really started to ring alarm bells for me. Now, they won a facile Munster Championship. They beat a Tipperary team who were beaten at the weekend by 16 points by down. So they also beat a Clare team in the final, and Clare also lost to Donegal at the weekend. So, it's nearly like a horse running in a later race. When you look at the form and you think, well, he's running in a higher grade than that, so he must be running a lesser race here. Like, you're looking at those teams that Kerry beaten. The Munster Championship probably give everyone a sort of a false reading of where Kerry are, because let's be honest, Enda, the Munster Championship is defunct. It's defunct as a competition, along with Leinster. There's still a glimmer of hope in Connacht, because the three teams obviously are quite evenly matched on any given day. Ulster is still very, very attritional and still very, very exciting to be seen this year. But the Munster Championship, for me, it probably didn't do Kerry any favours. That's the bottom line. Because when you're preparing for a game, you lose crucial time, crucial prep time. So I do believe that they're maybe looking at the scores that they're shipping. They're looking at how they're being exposed offensively. But sometimes, and this is the thing, Kerry spent a lot of time last year facing the game, having the game played in front of them, scrambling hard, getting bodies back. This year they seem to be chasing the game a lot. So they're, rather than facing, they're chasing. And when a team is doing that on a consistent basis, it's only going to end one way.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll say, like, to me, the last day, like, Mayo's athleticism around the middle third, Kerry couldn't live with that. You said the midfield issue there. Look, usually in any setup, O'Connor, he's still very young. Jack Barry, they're still number twos. In a county midfield, there's always that number one personality, that kind of general at midfield, and I just don't think them two boys have the personality. They're kind of like, I'm not trying to disrespect anyone here, but it feels like they're number two midfielder in a county team, and they're missing, as you said, that big personality in the David Moore, who obviously retired last year. And he I remember even last year coming against Cork in the first round of the championship, they were in trouble that game. David Moore came on after 50 minutes, caught 4 or 5 balls, primary ball, and drove them on and got them over the line that game. Like, so I'm looking at the subs that came on. I'm looking here, and I'm just thinking, like, that Jack hasn't introduced any new blood, any fresh blood. Now, again, I don't know, is there any new blood to be introduced here? But, like, it's the same. It seems like it's the same team. Like, Mayo, absolutely. Like, when you see Mayo's bench coming off the last day, it was Paddy Durkin, Enda Hession, Tommy Conroy, Owen McLaughlin, and Stephen Cohen. Like, maybe not Stephen Cohen, the exception to that, but them 4 boys, they're like greyhounds when they get ahead of the steam here. So Kerry could not live with that. So, like, seeing, like, they don't have, this is Kerry's full team here, Stevie. So, like, I'm struggling to see here where the improvement is going to come. Is it a second year syndrome here in terms of the hunger isn't there what it was? Obviously, Jack came in last year, his first year. Obviously, the hunger, freshness was about the setup here. Like, so I'm struggling to see where Kerry are going to improve here.
Yeah, well, look, you mentioned the word second year syndrome, and this is an interesting one, okay? I looked at the statistics there over the last 33 years. So take 33 years. 33 years takes us back to 1990, okay?
Yeah.
Cork won the All-Ireland. in 1990. They also won it in 1980. So if we start with Cork in 1990, from Cork in 1990 to Kerry in 2020, 2 counties have retained the All-Ireland. Kerry in 06 and 07. Yeah. And the one-off, Dublin 6 in a row team that we'll probably never see again at that caliber, 6 in a row. Out of the other 25 winners, no one ever managed to retain it back to back. And so it does go to show you that the competition, the Sam Maguire is ultimately a very, very difficult competition to win back to back. People come in with different hungers. Mayo are obviously starving for success, mad to break that glass ceiling. You have Derry, who have obviously evolved over the number of years. You have Armagh, who are probably looking on the outside thinking, we're close to Derry, we're close to Galway. Jesus, we were only beat by a point by Kerry. Mayo, we drew a Mayo in the athletic grounds. How far away are we? They're looking from the outside. Tyrone are probably on the way down. We'll chat about that obviously later. Galway will fancy their chances of winning All Ireland this year, and ultimately, the team that's motoring along now and no one's really talking about is Dublin, and they're going to be thereabouts. So it is for me this year, and unquestionably the most open All Ireland I think we've had in a long, long time. It really, really is. Like, and I think it's very, very hard to retain that hunger and that consistency. The other thing to remember as well is, the Cliffords were coming in this year, having had a long season. Kerry,
Yeah.
a long season with Fossa.
Yeah.
Like everyone's talking about all these games that David Clifford played. Like that's got to take its toll mentally, physically, psychologically. You know, the same as Shane Walsh. All these games that you're playing at club level, at county level, you're in a game-to-game cycle. You know, you're not getting an opportunity to do any strength training or any, you know, prehab or off-season work. You're literally going just from season to season to season to season, and that can take its toll. And obviously, there's a downtime, there's a partying time, there's a holiday time, there's a lack of pre-season. We bring the boys back in January. We'll tick through the National League. Their National League form is concerning, and this is one thing we said on the show as well. You know, because of the condensed season, you don't get those 5 to 6 week gaps between games anymore, where you can go away, do a little mini pre-season, have a little training camp. And Kerry were probably victims as well, you know, from the point of view being that they won their provincial title, albeit they only had to play 2 games, but they're still in that game cycle. When Kerry were preparing for Clare or Kerry were preparing for Tip, they weren't thinking of Mayo. They weren't thinking of Mayo. But Mayo were sitting for 5 or 6 weeks thinking of Kerry. And that's the difference. And that's the difference for me, you know.
What's the last thing? What impressed you most about Mayo?
I just think their defensive intensity without the ball. Their defensive intensity without the ball, their organisation as well. You know, Mayo have never had an issue, and never had an issue, and you know this as well. They've never had an issue getting scores. They've never had an issue putting up big scores against the better sides. Mayo's issue has probably been a game management perspective, or, you know, possibly from a defensive point of view, being a little bit open. But for me, you know, their ability to scramble really hard, getting goal side. I think they have a defensive organisation this year that they've never had before. You know, a real high level of organisation. I go back to the All-Ireland final, Enda, where they played Dublin in the COVID year. And I remember the clip very, very particularly from behind the goals, where Dublin pulled them wide. And actually, the 2 Dublin players were actually doing an illegal move in Gaelic football. They actually went off the pitch. You're actually not allowed to leave the pitch and come back against in an open play. But the 2 players, I think Dean Rock and someone else, I think it was Colin O'Callaghan, I think possibly, and they had gone off the pitch. And the 2 Mayo defenders actually followed them. You know, nearly were touch tight. Were nearly standing off the pitch. They were defending that naively at the time. You know, but I just think this year, you know, watching their National League games, watching that game against Kerry, there definitely is a defensive platform there and a defensive organisation that I feel is gonna have Mayo there in July.
Yeah, and when you think about it too, like, with obviously Leroy retired and Rushy Mullen is getting his first start for Geelong this year. Like, you know, two kind of that type of caliber players have gone this year, and they seem to be, you know, is it a thing, obviously, Stephen, like when you come in, management coming in for the first year, it's that first year bounce. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, is it like we're witnessing here Mayo's first year with McStay and Jacko's for a second year with Kerry? Is it? Would you know yourself? You've been in setups before between the first and second. Can you feel it? Is there a feeling there where you can, you know, kind of feel it within the squad, or you just know, fuck it, we're not getting the same bounce here, or, you know, your message isn't getting across as much, or do you ever get that, you know, with your experience?
I don't know if we can, if that's the case or not. Like, you know, I'm sure Kerry have a very, very high performance environment, and they've created a very high performance environment there. But one thing that Mayo has done, probably, you know, the 2 boys probably that have obviously, you know, gone into management this year, you know, that were pundits, you know, Kevin and Colin, for example. And what I noticed, the distinct difference between both management teams is that Kevin has filled his management team with a huge amount of experience and a high caliber level of coaching experience there, with Stephen Rochford, Tony Buckley, you know, behind the scenes. And that's not a fluke, you know, that's not coincidence. Like, you know, he understands that the game is changing. These are 2 boys that have been involved in the game. They're still attached to the game. They still understand how the game's evolving, you know, because the game is evolving at the minute, and the game is changing slightly. The game is changing in the way teams press kickouts. The game is changing in the way teams are looking at their kickouts. The game is changing from an offensive point of view, the way teams are trying to attack. You know, they're trying to add so many different strings to their bows. You know, how they're using the offensive mark, how they're defending. You know, the game's fascinating now, you know, from a tactical point of view. There's so many things happening, and I actually think the game is becoming a lot more open. There's a lot more scores. I think it's becoming a lot more enjoyable. We always sort of criticize stuff, right? So we'll always look at a game and say, Jesus, that was dire, and that was awful, and that was rubbish. But, like, you watch a soccer match, how many soccer matches are absolutely dire to watch? Like, you know, how many rugby matches so attritional and boring, and and that's the thing about Gaelic. We just think that every single game should be fascinating and brilliant. Like no one could argue, for example, that Armagh Derry in the Ulster final was just exhilarating. It was hugely engrossing. No one wanted to turn it off. Went to extra time. It was mistakes. There was, for example, like if you boil down the couple of incidents in the game, you're looking at a kick out that maybe just went wrong. You're looking at a high catch from Glass and then a mark from away. Whole load of different things that happened in those last few minutes that dictated the outcome of that game. And I think Gaelic football is in a very, very healthy place at the minute, and particularly at the highest level. Like I really do. And I think this year's All Ireland is going to be extremely interesting. But on the Kerry thing, I do believe if you look at Tyrone, how they flopped in 2022. You go back, obviously you can't really compare many years before that because Dublin were obviously there, for 6 years. But if you go pre-Dublin, Donegal 2012, knocked out in 2013 early, Kerry 2014, knocked out in 2015, and it happens, and it happens. Like, the players are only human, and like there's only so many times that you can tell a player, how hungry are you. Maybe a lot of those players are just so relieved to get that medal, and they'll get more. That particular Seanie O'Shea, David Clifford, they're going to get more than one All Ireland. Like, let's be honest, like they are. They're going to win more than one All Ireland medal. Like, that's the reality of the situation. It may not be this year, but it could be next year or the year after that or the year after that. But
do you see Kerry getting to the last four?
Well, I think with the format, I think the way the format is laid out now, absolutely. And if you look at it, like we're going to talk about this, obviously, like the groups for me are a little bit. It's hard to get excited, right? And I missed a bit of football last weekend. I didn't watch it all, right? And probably the reason being is that it's just not really the group format is just not overly enthralling at the present time, right? Because three will qualify. If you actually think of it, a team could possibly games, one in their provincial championship, two in a group, and still go through. They could lose three times and still win the All Ireland. And it's a bit mad, but I do believe that Kerry they'll obviously will qualify, and I do believe that they will win a playoff. So what will probably happen is they'll probably finish second in the group, and then they'll win a playoff against the third place team. Because look, if you actually look at Sligo and Kildare's group, there's actually a strong possibility that one team in that group could go through in 1 point.
Yeah.
Which if Sligo and Kildare were both to lose to Roscommon and Dublin, they could go through in 1 point, depending on who loses the least.
Yeah, look at the format we've just discussed in the past. We're not exactly a massive look at. We said this before. I think the GA obviously they're looking at the end this year and they'll rejig it again like everything else, and there'll be enough people will give it out and they'll have to look at it and they'll have to look at. You're right. It is when you put it like that. The Dublin, Roscommon, Kildare, Sligo group. Obviously, if one team finishes at 1 point and going through, it doesn't. Look at personally, my point of view, a third place team should not be going through. It should be the top two, and that's it, and leave it at that. But again, look at